David, thank you so much for not just your warm hospitality today, but the extraordinary engagement that we've had ever since you've been on the job. And I said earlier that the Foreign Secretary hit the ground at a full sprint, and that is not an exaggeration. I think given the multiplicity, the complexity, the urgency of the challenges we're facing, we are so grateful to have such a strong partner in David, in the government, the Prime Minister, and today and in the days ahead, we're continuing to deepen the work that we're doing together. We talk about the special relationship. I like to call it essential. Essential for our nations, essential for our people, essential for people well beyond our shores. And that's why, on David's first visit to the United States, we agreed to launch this strategic dialogue to even more effectively advance our enduring shared priorities, our interests, our values, priorities that will be at the heart of the discussions that our teams are having, but also that Prime Minister Starmer and President Biden will have later this week in Washington. Those priorities, of course, include our resolute support for Ukraine faced with the ongoing Russian aggression. The United States, the United Kingdom are leaders in providing security assistance to Ukraine, and together, from day one, continuing to this day, we stand strongly with our Ukrainian partners. As David said, we'll be traveling together to Kyiv this week, and I think it's a critical moment for Ukraine. In the midst of what is an intense fall fighting season, with Russia continuing to escalate its aggression against civilians, against critical infrastructure, and of course against Ukrainian forces. We see it ramping up its attacks on cities, on people, in particular targeting the energy infrastructure, electricity, all in advance of the coldest months. Putin's winter playbook of weaponizing energy and electricity. This joint trip reflects strong transatlantic support, aligned also with our NATO allies, with our Indo-Pacific partners, with the more than 50 countries that continue to strongly and resolutely support Ukraine. Together, we're working to make sure that Ukraine can defend its territory against the ongoing aggression, that it will be able to stand strongly on its own 2 feet, militarily, economically, democratically, and that it will remain on the path that the Ukrainian people so desire it to be on, of closer integration with Europe, with transatlantic institutions. Ukraine is clearly on that path. Together, we're going to continue to help it move along that path. Now, one of the reasons that Putin is able to continue this aggression is because of the provision of support from the People's Republic of China, the biggest supplier of machine tools, the biggest supplier of microelectronics, all of which are helping Russia sustain its defense industrial base. Our countries are aligned in holding accountable PRC entities that are engaged in these practices, fueling the Russian war machine. We also discussed joint efforts to ensure peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait and freedom of navigation and overflight in the South China Sea. For both of us, maintaining peace and stability, preserving the status quo, is essential, and it's essential not just to us, it's again essential to countries all around the world. We also agree on the importance of continuing to seek ways to cooperate with China on global challenges that affect our mutual interests and affect people everywhere, like the climate talks that the U.S. team held in Beijing just in recent days in advance of the next COP. Now, to wage his war of aggression on Ukraine, Putin is also relying increasingly on help from Iran and the DPRK. In these instances, to get actual weapons in clear violation of multiple UN Security Council resolutions. Now, Tehran has long supplied deadly drones. It's built a drone factory in Russia. It's trained Russian personnel on how to operate them. For some time, the United States has warned of an additional threat, the provision by Iran of ballistic missiles to Russia for use in Ukraine. We've warned Tehran publicly, we've warned Tehran privately, that taking this step would constitute a dramatic escalation. Dozens of Russian military personnel have been trained in Iran to use the Fata 360 close-range ballistic missile system, which has a maximum range of 75 miles. Russia has now received shipments of these ballistic missiles and will likely use them within weeks in Ukraine against Ukrainians. Russia has an array of its own ballistic missiles, but the supply of Iranian missiles enables Russia to use more of its arsenal for targets that are further from the front line, while dedicating the new missiles it's receiving from Iran for closer range targets. This development and the growing cooperation between Russia and Iran threatens European security and demonstrates how Iran's destabilizing influence reaches far beyond the Middle East. For its part, Russia is sharing technology that Iran seeks. This is a two-way street, including on nuclear issues, as well as some space information. So, as Iran's destabilizing activities spread, so does Russia, sowing even greater insecurity in their regions and around the world. In recent days, we've been sharing intelligence behind these findings with our allies and partners, and working together to ensure that there will be significant economic consequences for Tehran's actions. The United States will be announcing further sanctions on Iran later today, including additional measures on Iran Air. We expect allies and partners will be announcing their own new measures on Iran as well. Iran's new president and foreign minister have repeatedly said that they want to restore engagement with Europe. They want to receive sanctions relief. Destabilizing actions like these will achieve exactly the opposite. As David mentioned, we also discussed efforts by Russia to interfere in our democracies. We agree that deepening cooperation with our partners in Europe to push back against the Kremlin's efforts to use disinformation and lies to polarize our societies, distort the public debate, that this work is essential. Finally, on Israel and Gaza, we talked today about our ongoing efforts to prevent the crisis in the Middle East from escalating further. Our nations helped Israel defend itself against an unprecedented attack from Iran a few months ago. We're prepared to act together to help Israel defend itself in the future. We're equally determined to end the conflict in Gaza as soon as possible, and the quickest way to do so remains bringing the ceasefire agreement over the finish line. It's the best way to get the hostages home, the best way to get a massive infusion of assistance for people who so desperately need it in Gaza. But we agreed that we cannot wait on a ceasefire in order to continue to do everything possible to get humanitarian assistance to those who need it. And you see what we're doing now with the vaccinations and the polio campaign to prevent a terrible outbreak of polio in Gaza. Let me just note in conclusion that we also talk more broadly, and our teams will be talking more broadly in the coming days about how we can strengthen the alliances that we're both a central part of, in particular NATO. We welcome Britain's new NATO First defense strategy, the Prime Minister's commitment to increase UK defense spending to 2.5%, and we're urging others to do the same, especially in light of the serious threats that we all face. We discuss continued trilateral cooperation with Australia through AUKUS, especially through nuclear-powered submarines. This reflects growing efforts to weave together allies in Europe and the Indo-Pacific, to build bridges between them, because what happens in one theater has an impact on the other. And more, our allies and partners in Europe, in the transatlantic theater, and in the Indo-Pacific theater recognize this and are acting on it. Finally, the Prime Minister and David have made it a top priority to reset relations with Europe, including seeking closer UK-Europe cooperation through a wide-ranging UK-EU security pact. We fully support these efforts. It's good for the UK, it's good for Europe, it's good for the United States, which benefits when our transatlantic allies are tied even more closely together. And I know when the President sees the Prime Minister on Friday, he'll also look forward to having a few words about Northern Ireland. We are very pleased at the commitment that Prime Minister Starmer and Secretary for Northern Ireland Ben are showing to the Good Friday Agreement, to supporting Northern Ireland's prosperity. And we share this goal and will work with all parties to sustain and advance the agreement. David's often said that Britain is always stronger when it works with others. So is the United States, especially when we work with our closest ally, the United Kingdom. I look forward to building on that strength and also spending a little bit of quality time with David as we make our way to Ukraine in the days ahead. Thank you.